Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. According to information we have, the Russians conducted another massive missile strike and drone strike over the central part and the eastern part of Ukraine. As you can see, according to this map, the explosions took place in the city of Kiev, Kharkiv, Pavlograd and Kryvyi Rog. During the previous night we got some videos. For example, in this video we can see the explosion that took place in the central part of Kiev. Currently we don't know for sure what the Russians were bombing and attacking exactly in Kiev, but we know for sure what the Russians were bombing and attacking in the city of Kharkiv. According to information we have, during the previous nights, during the previous day and the evening of the 1st of September, the Russians launched at least 13. Some sources are saying that the Russians launched just 9. Some sources are saying that the Russians launched 13 Iskander missiles, and as a result of those attacks the Russians destroyed the headquarters and the concentration of force of the 3rd Azov Brigade that Ukrainians have redeployed in this area recently with the purpose maybe to counterattack the Russians in the Kharkiv direction. Anyway, the Ukrainians suffered significant losses. Now let's move to the line of combat contact. We have a lot of very interesting updates, and the most important updates are coming from the South Donetsk direction. And according to information we have, during the previous night the Russians conducted a full-scale offensive operation on the road TO509 in direction of Prichistovka, and that the first Russian forces, the first Russian group and assault troopers entered the village of Prichistovka. There are very heavy clashes right now, and the Russians most likely will force the Ukrainians to fall back. I'll remind you that just from the beginning of July the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory heavily. Hundreds of bombs, hundreds of missiles, hundreds of drones attacked the territory just since the beginning of July. Almost every single square kilometer was bombed and attacked by the Russians. And now, after such a heavy artillery preparation, drone preparation, the Russians launched full-scale offensive, and they have already entered the village. Currently, we haven't received even a single geolocation that can confirm the presence of the Russian forces in the village of Prichistovka. So let's wait a little bit. Maybe today we're going to receive some updates. Now let's talk about Vuhledar. If you remember, just yesterday we were talking about very powerful, very heavy artillery preparation that the Russians conducted over the stronghold. The Russians were bombing everything, and everything was under very heavy fire. And we expected that after such a heavy preparation, the Russians would begin their offensive, and the Russians began their offensive this morning, the previous night. We have some fire anomalies. This map shows us the fire anomalies in the activity of Russian artillery. As you can see, the Russians were bombing the city of Vuhledar itself, the eastern part of the city. The Russians were bombing the city of Bogoyavlenka to the north of Vuhledar, and the Russians were bombing the coal mine. So the Russians were bombing every single, let's say, stronghold in this direction with the purpose to reduce the Ukrainian chances to understand where exactly the Russians are going to attack. Most likely the Ukrainians were expecting that the Russians would attack in direction of Vuhledar, so that's why they have concentrated their main forces exactly in the territory of the stronghold. But the Russians decided to attack a coal mine, the coal mine, and we have the first geolocations that confirms the Russian presence in this area. In this video we can see the Russian personnel carrier that was moving, let's say, along the streets of the coal mine South Donbass. The Russians, as you can see, this coal mine was already reduced to ruins. The single Russian personnel carrier was moving through the streets until they get the landing point. As you can see in this video, the Ukrainians were attacking the Russian personnel carrier, and the Russian drone operator was trying to find the position of possible Ukrainians that hide in this area. We see a mortar strike, we see FPV drone strike, and you can see that at some moment the driver of Russian personnel carrier start panic because the Russians haven't completed the landing operation. Some Russian soldiers got under the Russian vehicle, but they managed to save. Nothing happened to them because the personnel carrier went above them, so nothing special with them. So the Russians captured the building, and the Russian personnel carrier left the territory. So if we return back back on map, the Russian vehicle was moving along the street. The Russians answered this street and got as close as possible to this building. Exactly in this point, the Russian soldiers landed and captured this building, and then the personal carrier returned back and moving along this street returned to the territory of the stronghold that is located most likely in the northeastern direction. So anyway, summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that there are very heavy clashes right now in the territory of the coal mine. We don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians were forced to fall back from this territory completely. Most likely the Ukrainians during the day and during the clashes brought additional reinforcement. But anyway, I believe that in a day or two, the coal mine would be completely captured by the Russians, and then the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back not just from Vuhledar but from every single village and the stronghold along TO524 road, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back towards Bagayavlenka. So the process, the battle for Vuhledar has begun. Let's wait for additional updates. Now let's talk about the Pokrov's direction, and today we have very interesting updates. And first let's talk about the city of Novogrodovka. If you remember, the 90%, according to different sources, the Novogrodovka was captured already a few days ago, maybe a week ago, but we still haven't received, by the evening of the 1st of September, we didn't have even a single geolocation that can confirm the Russian presence in the central park. And today the Russian sources finally published some video that confirms the Russian presence inside of the city. In this video we can see two Russian soldiers who raised the flag in the main in the central part of the city, right in front, in the vicinity, in the area of the central park. So this is the place where the Russian soldiers raised the flag, and based on this video we have adjusted the map. We have turned the contested area into the territory under complete Russian control. As you can see, there are still a lot of streets and buildings, a lot of places in Novogrodovka that are considered by us as a contested area. So let's wait for additional geolocations. Now let's move further to Selidova. There are very heavy clashes in this area, and there are three, let's say, important things. First of all, according to unconfirmed reports, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the hospital. We have already discussed this yesterday in the evening update, and we have some different mappers, pro-Russian mappers have already adjusted their maps. So this is the current situation according to them. But as for the geolocations, we still continue receiving reports from the area of the intersection of the road and the railway. In this video we can see the group of Russian soldiers, stormtroopers, that landed in the territory, and during a few seconds later, we will not watch the video till the end, the Ukrainian tank destroyed the Russian personal carrier with a, let's say, tank attack within a very short distance. So most likely most of these soldiers, Russian soldiers, were wounded. So anyway, this video confirms that the Russians do have control over this territory, over this part of Mikhailovka. This is not Selidova yet, and but as for Selidova itself, we still haven't received even a single geolocation that confirms Russian control or the Russian presence in this part of the city. So for now everything looks like this. Now let's move further in the southern directions to the city of Ukrainsk and to the village of Lisovka. More and more Russian sources confirm the complete control over the city of Lisivka. So this territory was captured by the Russians by, let's say, by the beginning of the 2nd of September of 2024. And as for Ukrainians, today we have just one video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see the Ukrainian volunteers who were moving, who were located exactly in this point, and one of the volunteer was pointing his hand exactly in this direction, in the eastern direction, saying that this part of Ukrainsk is already under complete Russian control. And if you watch the video, you can hear the sounds of explosions and machine guns and bullets and something like this. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the first Russian soldiers have already entered the village of Ukrainsk, and that there are very heavy clashes right now. As you can see, the Russians are trying to complete two important things. First, the Russians are trying to encircle the Ukrainians in the vicinity of Nivoyska, but the sources reported that the Ukrainians have already abandoned their positions, or abandoning them right now, moving as far as possible from the epicenter, from the area of possible cauldron. So this is the first objective of the armed forces of Russian Federation. And the second objective, and the most important, is that at this stage of battle for the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are trying to conquer and to take under control the landfills and the terracons. So the Russians are not moving further in Selidova. They captured some territories and now they stopped. The Russians are trying to take under control the landfills, because the Russians understand if they can control the landfills, then despite the number of forces Ukrainians are able to bring here back, they will not be able to hold the Russian pressure, and they would be forced to fall back to the Pokrovsk itself or even further in direction of Dnipro. So this is the situation in this direction. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Toretsk area. According to information we have, according to different mappers, the Russians improved their positions around the prison. The Russians moved further in the western direction and took under control additional barracks and the buildings, and the Russians improved their positions in the southern part of the prison by capturing the coal mine of Nova. So these two territories were captured by the Russians. Now you can see that the Russians are trying to avoid clashes for prison itself. They try to encircle and they try to force the Ukrainians to fall back. As you can see, the Russian tactics has been changed since the beginning of the special military operation. Now they try to avoid clashes. They try to maneuver and to manipulate with their forces, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from every single city and town. Now let's talk about Klishchiivka. A very reliable source reported that the Ukrainians abandoned their positions completely on the Russian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. So, summarizing everything, according to the source, the Ukrainians left everything that located to the right of this red arrow. So, everything between Klishchiivka and Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal is already under complete Russian control. As for Seversk direction, we haven't received anything. As for the Kupiansk direction, we haven't received anything as well. Now, let's talk about the Kupiansk, the Kursk area. The Russians managed to restore control over some positions in the vicinity of Martinovka. We have the video of how the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group ambushed the Ukrainian forces, and a significant number of personnel and vehicles were destroyed as a Russian counterattack. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Some mappers adjusted their maps as well. For example, pro-Ukrainian deep state reported that the fields between Ruskaya Porechna and Novaya Starochina were captured by the Ukrainians. So this territory that is blinking right now in front of your screens. And also, according to deep state, the Ukrainians established complete control over the village of Kruglinka, Staraya Sorochina, Novaya Sorochina, Orlovka, Pogribki, Marievka. So everything were captured by the Ukrainians. So significant progress. But I'm not sure that this is significant progress, because according to the map of Syrsky that was published a few weeks ago, all these villages were already captured by the Ukrainians, and Malaya Loknya was encircled with the former women prison. So anyway, we have some geolocations. In this video we can see the attack of Ukrainian FPV drone on Russian tank, and the Russian tank was located in this point, which also confirms maybe the line of combat contact. So anyway, let's wait for additional updates. Now let's talk about Korineva. According to information we have, the Ukrainians continue regrouping their forces in the vicinity of the city with the purpose to attack and to answer the southeastern part, but the Russians managed to bring significant number of forces, significant number of drones, intelligence drones. The Russians control the let's say outskirts of the city, and they bomb and destroy everything that Ukrainians try to concentrate. Furthermore, we have additional updates from Глубоко Ugrody, and in this video we can see the video was published by the Russian sources. In this video we can see the launching positions of Ukrainian HIMARS systems. And as a result of Iskander strike, first the Russians destroyed one HIMARS system and then they destroyed the second one. So the Ukrainians continue suffering losses in this area as well. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.